So how much gold or silver do you need? It's a great question. Unfortunately, it's one that only you can answer, but we're going to lay down some gold lines, maybe sell some $7 beer to the show. Not that YouTube would allow that, but we're going to help you get some answers to your questions. You just have to bring your own beer. So in June, I made a video about a golden passport. Now this is one of those videos that I didn't title very well because the idea of the golden passport was really just an opener. I had run into an acquaintance who was humble bragging about applying for dual citizenship and another who was joking about how little he needed to live on. It made for a good story that led into this idea that it might take this much gold and silver to live in this part of the world and another amount of gold and silver to live somewhere else. Now, this is an idea that we've covered a few times over the years here, but in that case, it accounted for various countries. So the idea that maybe you could head to Spain and you could live the good life on less money or less gold. Or if you watch the video, this part will make sense. You could live for just about nothing as somebody's houseboy. Well, we're coming straight at this idea this time for a few reasons. The biggest being that both average monthly expenses and gold and silver prices have gone up. So we need to look at it, consider what it takes to live these days and whether the amount of gold or silver that we're holding as a backup still makes sense, or even what it should be to begin with. Now, as a spoiler, gold is up 19.5% this year, silver is up 15.5%, so that beats the rise of the average expense here in the United States. But not by much, at least not if we push our time frames back a bit. According to the most recent data that we have from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a family of four in the United States spends somewhere between $7,875 and $9,168. Depends on the age of the kids. So the average there, though, is $8,460. That's what we're going to zero in on. Everybody's expenses are going to be different, but we have to focus in on one, or this video will take entirely too long. So remember that number, $8,460. Now, most of that expense goes to needs. Things like housing, transportation, food, insurance, healthcare, and education. Less than $1,000 of it goes to things that we might consider discretionary. So let's do some quick math here. $8,460 minus the discretionary portion leaves about $7,500 for monthly expenses. Gold just hit $2,473, silver's $27. So just looking at spot with no premiums in play, 3 ounces of gold would nearly equal that amount of $7,500. Add 3 ounces of silver and we'd be there. Now, some of the simplicity of the math here is pure coincidence, but keep that idea in mind. 3 ounces of gold would cover the average monthly needs of a family of 4. Add a little bit of silver to that, that covers the rest. So if we said 40 ounces of silver, that would probably cover the discretionary expenses as well. Now, if we're listening to traditional advice, we have 3 to 6 months expenses saved in cash. So that would be $25,000 to $50,000 if we lined them up to these average expenses for a family of 4 in the United States. And so if you have 3 to 6 months of your average expenses already saved up, squirreled away, you could look at gold and silver truly as a CYA fund. And that's typically how I think about it. We don't need 3 to 6 months worth of expenses saved in gold and silver, but it's a good marker. I look at precious metals a few ways. Emergency fund first, that was my first goal, and then whatever else I can swing to have available for opportunities. So opportunity fund, I guess. We're just talking about the first one. Now, it's funny how this idea of having 3 ounces of gold as a preliminary emergency fund just keeps coming up. I'm not sure if I'm finding evidence to support this idea or there really is something special about 3 ounces of gold. Who knows? But I've been consistent here. I've said 3 ounces of gold and 40 ounces of silver was my initial goal, and to the extent that I make recommendations, I think that that amount could make sense for most people. I actually mentioned that number in one of my very first videos, and here we are 4 years later. I'm still using that number, so I think that there's something to it. Unfortunately, though, I don't think that amount is enough. I see it as a starting point, not a stopping point. So if we want to look at it in terms of what we might need rather than how it might cover a family of 4 for a month in the United States, well, we need to take this idea a little bit further. Now, by the way, a single person or a married couple with no kids, they would have much lower expenses, more like $4,300 or $7,100 respectively. We'll come back to that. Now, what I've done is thought through what I might need to supplement a longer need. And coincidence pops up again here because through the 20 teens, I thought it might be around $3,000. In 2020, I thought it might be around $4,000, and today I think it could be about $5,000. The coincidence is based on the spot price at the time. 2 ounces of gold would cover those amounts regardless of the time frame. So 20 teens, 2020, and today. So how much gold or silver you need becomes a case of how long you think you might need to subsidize a loss. So using my numbers, it would be 2 ounces of gold per month. Now that was me subsidizing. That's not my total expenses. If we jump back to average expense and we use the traditional advice of having 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash savings, that would be based on likely timelines. Now, I do have cash savings, so that would hypothetically be covered already, but the timeline there makes sense. So if you wanted to cover 100% of your expenses with gold and silver, and we did the math using US average expenses for a family of 4, that'd be 3 ounces of gold and 40 ounces of silver per month. Now, 3 months, which would give us a little bit more runway, would be 9 ounces of gold and 120 ounces of silver. Or if you're like me and you prefer gold, it would be 10 ounces of gold and 30 or 40 ounces of silver. Just makes things a little easier. In 6 months, that would be 20 ounces of gold, 80 ounces of silver, and don't worry, we're going to recap this in the end. But again, this is for a family of 4. A single person's average monthly expense in the United States would be covered by about half of that. 5 ounces of gold for 3 months, 10 ounces for 6. Recap. We're going to simplify this. 10 ounces of gold, and we'll just say 40 ounces of silver covers a family of 4 for 3 months. 40 ounces of gold and about 150 ounces of silver covers that same average family for 1 year. Now, if we want an average individual, just cut that amount in half. So I just gave some amounts that would have you covered for various time frames. Now, how much you need is still a variable here. If you're 29 and you have 3 ounces of gold, I might even say, good job, mission accomplished. You might not need any more than that. But if you're older like me, being prepared for some kind of loss of income might be harder to bounce back from. And I think that I would need 10 ounces of gold and I don't know, maybe 40 ounces of silver. That's to feel like I'm covered. Now, my outlier case that I gave, just to confuse us even more, what I personally use is 50 ounces of gold. 100 ounces of silver, again, if we're still keeping track. That's 2 ounces of gold per month for 2 years, and then I round it up. I wouldn't argue that I need 50 ounces of gold. I would just say it's the amount that lets me sleep better. So if we want to make sense of all this, we need to get specific here. We need to break this down into tiers. Okay, so we're going to make this easy. We have average monthly expense numbers. We just covered those. And then the idea that expenses are a good way to assess levels of needs, because that's really what we're trying to get after here. So 3 columns. We have basic needs, we have emergency needs, and we have extended needs. For basic needs, let's just cover all of our needs for 1 month. Now, I know my expenses, you know yours, but we're going to use average expenses here. I'm going to treat that as a universal number. So 3 ounces of gold, 40 ounces of silver, that would cover 1 month for the average family of 4 in the United States, but it's also an amount that I think would be able to get most of us out of a pinch. And the reason I said I think that's a universal number is I don't think we need to increase it. I don't think we need to decrease it. I think that that's a good base number. For emergency needs, we're just going to take this further. If you want to know how much you need to be covered for a significant emergency, we're just going to use 3 to 6 months. So that would be 10 to 20 ounces of gold, 50 to 100 ounces of silver, where silver really isn't as much about the value as much as it's about flexibility and convenience. But if you're really into silver, just simple math will allow you to swap that, mix and match. And then if we really want to go beyond one big emergency, we have extended needs. So we're no longer talking about a few months, we're looking at a year or more. So this would be 40 to 50 ounces of gold, 100 ounces of silver. So those are actual examples with 3 answers for how much gold and silver you need. Now just take silver out for a minute. It was 3 ounces of gold, 10 to 20 ounces of gold, or 40 to 50 ounces of gold. And that's based on what you mean by need. Now, I don't think that this amount of gold and silver replaces the need for cash savings, but basing it on your monthly expenses gives you some kind of structure to just answer that question of how much you need. Now, the simple reality being some people burn through capital faster than others. Now, if you haven't dug into your actual expense needs, maybe you don't know how much you burn in a month, the cases that I just gave, they let you know how you stack up against an average need. So if you use the average numbers, just keep in mind that things change based on your time to or from retirement. So in your 20s, you don't need to be aiming at that third column, pouring all of your available capital into a pile of precious metals. And even in your 50s, you might still not need to be in that last column. Maybe you have other fallback plans. It'll cover some of that need as well. This is just an easy way to think about planning based around how much you might need. And the answer to that question of how much you need, of course, typically falls somewhere between how much you have and how much you want. Now, hopefully this video, though, gives you at least one more marker to plan around. So there we go. Easy answer to a difficult question, or 3 easy answers. Let us know what you think, though, what you shoot for, whether you're still working on it, maybe you're well past it. Let us know. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.